Silly season dominoes are starting to fall in the world of motorsports as Alex Poe will be heading to McLaren in 2023, and in very shocking fashion, Todd Reddick will be headed to 2311 Racing starting in 2024. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We've got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to start our paint schemes and sponsorship news first. Let's jump into those really quickly. The first paint scheme we're going to take a look at is Martin Truex Jr.'s 2022 Interstate Battery scheme that we're going to see this weekend at New Hampshire. Love this paint scheme. Very similar to Kyle Busch's one. Not only think it's really different as a number, I think it looks really exciting though. It looks amazing, and I'm looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend at New Hampshire. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Brandon Jones' 2022 Watts Menard scheme that we're going to be seeing this weekend at New Hampshire. Not much really to say here other than the fact that basically Watts on the front of the car, which I think that's really cool. I think it looks pretty good. Excited to see on the racetrack this weekend at New Hampshire. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Norm Benning's 2022 MDIA Incorporated scheme that I believe we're going to be seeing later this year at Pocono, so next weekend at Pocono. Honestly, I think it looks pretty good in my opinion. Excited to see Norm Benning back on the racetrack. I'm very excited when he's always on the racetrack. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Julie Lander's 2022 Boss Beauty's Garage XYZ scheme that we're going to see this weekend at New Hampshire. Love this paint scheme, in my opinion. Alva Prime's had a lot of great paint schemes. I love the pink and the bluish color they've got on it. I think it looks great. Absolutely amazing. And I'm excited to see on the racetrack this weekend here at New Hampshire. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Michael McDowell's 2022 Flow Racing scheme that we're going to be seeing this weekend at New Hampshire. Love this paint scheme. The red and the white contrast very well, and I love the black number. I think it looks incredible. Looks absolutely amazing. And I'm excited to see on the racetrack this weekend at New Hampshire. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ty Gibbs' 2022 Cub Cadet scheme that we're going to be seeing later this season at, I believe, Watkins Glen. Looks solid in my opinion. Not great. I mean, the colors just don't absolutely work perfectly. I think this car would have worked better with the white number. Honestly, I just don't think this paint scheme looks amazing. It's not terrible. It's just not my favorite paint scheme in my honest opinion. Next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Spencer Boyd's 2022 Bucks for the Brave Record Rack scheme that I believe we're going to see next weekend at Pocono. Pretty good looking scheme in my opinion. Really excited to see Spencer Boyd always finds a way to bring different sponsors in. He's a guy that knows how to bring them in, and hopefully he'll have a good run in this truck at Pocono. And the final paint scheme we are taking a look at is Josh Blickey's 2022 Ziegler Ditech scheme that I believe we're going to be seeing later this year at Pocono or this upcoming weekend at New Hampshire. Not much to say other than the fact that basically the only difference is that Ditech is on the front of the car. Looks decent in my opinion. Hopefully he has a good run in it, and hopefully he has a solid run in that car this weekend or later down the road. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about the Michigan Xfinity Series race. It has a title sponsor for the race called the New Holland 250. I believe New Holland has sponsored this race in the past in the last couple years and also the ARCA races as well. I think it's really exciting to see that New Holland's been sponsoring. But like I said, I think they sponsored ARCA race in the past. Really excited to see that they're sponsoring once again, and glad to see that New Holland will sponsor the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Michigan. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're going to talk about Mantis. As it was announced that Mantis will become an associate sponsor for Ryan Vargas this weekend at New Hampshire. As I mentioned, associate sponsor for Ryan Vargas. Really awesome that Ryan Vargas has a new associate sponsor. I believe this is the only race that Mantis is planning to be sponsored, which I like this car. Basically, Mantis sponsors a little more than this, but I think it's awesome that Mantis is going to sponsor this weekend. Really exciting for sure. I'm definitely excited to see that Mantis will sponsor Ryan Vargas, at least as an associate sponsor. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about SeatGeek. As it was revealed this morning that SeatGeek has announced a multi-year deal sponsorship with NASCAR, which becomes the official ticket marketplace of the sanctioning body and its own tracks. SeatGeek's had very big partnerships in the world of other sports, including the MLB. They've also been associated with concert brandings, and they've been associated with Formula 1 and IndyCar as well. SeatGeek is one of the best marketplaces when it comes to getting really good deals on tickets. If you get green seats, you're definitely getting a good seat. If you have a red seat, you're getting a bad deal. SeatGeek's a really good branding. I think it's awesome that they're coming on to work with NASCAR, and it's very exciting news for sure. And now we'll go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're going to talk about Michael Massey. As Michael Massey announced this morning that he has decided to leave the FIA and he'll be relocating to Australia to spend time with his family. Michael Massey, for those who don't know, used to basically be the FIA director, basically ran as the F1 race director, and was involved in the controversy that between Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton near the end, where they basically, on the last lap of the race, basically had a one-lap shootout near the end, where Max Verstappen had soft tires and Lewis Hamilton had really older tires and not much pressure tires than him. This guy, of course, like I said, was behind that, but also still been working in the FIA, just not as a race director anymore, but still had a higher up, and now he'll be leaving the FIA. He had good things he did, but also a lot of bad things he did, and he basically affected the outcome of this event. I hope he does get time to spend with his family. I hope he reflects on what happened, but at the same token, same time, wishing the best of luck to him, and good luck to him going forward. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the IndyCar race from Toronto. Now, Nathan Brown, who works for the IndyCar, put out a really good tweet in regards to what NBC plans to do for this upcoming race on Peacock. And he says that NBC pledges just 3 minutes of commercials between the green flag and the checker flag during the whole event that will be televised on Peacock for the IndyCar race at Toronto, which, of course, will be taking place this weekend at Toronto. Now, ultimately, of course, this race will be on Peacock, so while I really appreciate the fact that there's going to be a lack of commercials in the event, I am anticipating and expecting that this race, unfortunately, will probably not get a lot of viewers. I would not be surprised if this race does not get more than maybe 200 or 250,000 viewers. One, you're going to have a lot of fans watching the NASCAR race in New Hampshire, which I believe is going to be going on at the same time as the IndyCar race. And number two, Peacock generally does not have as many subscriptions, and when they overfill the subscription numbers, sometimes the website unfortunately goes down. Overall, it is what it is, though, and again, it's good to see at least they're not going to have as many commercials, less commercials, and a lack of commercials given side by side, the better it's going to be. But I am unfortunately anticipating there's going to be some issues with the service on this race, but I'm glad to see that they are doing this, and I think this is overall really, really great that they're doing this, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Josh Williams. As Josh Williams is going to drive the 5 for Beach McLeod Motorsports this weekend at New Hampshire. He and Matt Mills are actually going to be swapping, and Matt Mills also is going to be driving the 78 for Beach McLeod Motorsports this weekend in New Hampshire, basically doing a driver swap to help in the owner's points. The 5 car is not doing a really great job in the owner's points currently, and the 78 car is currently in a much better position when it comes to the owner's points than the 5 cars. They're basically doing a driver swap for this weekend. Of course, with the fact that I think one of their drivers, like Seven Parsons, is not driving for the team anymore, they can make some of the moves that they are currently doing at the moment. I think these moves are actually really, really cool to see. I'm glad to see that they're basically relocating the drivers to different positions on the team, but of course driving full-time for the team. Hopefully both drivers, they can have really strong runs in their respective cars. Beach McLeod Motorsports had an up and down year so far this year, and I'm excited to see with this move what they can do for both drivers. This probably will be continuing to swap back and forth the rest of the year. We'll see what happens going forward, but that's what's going on in regards to Beach McLeod Motorsports. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Pato O'Ward. Now, we've got a lot of McLaren news to talk about today on the channel regarding their IndyCar program and their F1 program. But Pato O'Ward was asked about testing basically testing the McLaren cars for FP1 practice. And he says that I'm going to have a call with Zach Brown later this week. And he says, I haven't even mentioned it. I know it will come, but I'm fully focused on what I have to do in IndyCar currently at the moment. Now, Pato O'Ward is currently competing for an IndyCar championship and is still looking for his first ever IndyCar championship. However, he is also supposed to be testing an F1 car, I believe, at some point this year. There's wonder currently a moment, considering at Colton Herta, he tested F1 car earlier this week at Portimao, I believe in Portugal, if I'm not mistaken. He basically wants to know if he's going to be able to test that Formula 1 car at some point and get a little bit of experience, because he's definitely one of the drivers that is being considered for the Formula 1 car at McLaren, considering that Daniel Ricciardo is likely not probably going to come back after 2023. There's talk maybe he would not even return after 2023. But we'll see what happens going down the road. Pato O'Ward is a very talented driver who is an IndyCar championship contender, but also at one point was in, I think, the Red Bull Junior program at one point and wanted to compete there. So we're going to generally have to wait and see what happens in regards to that to see if when Pato O'Ward does get an opportunity to race with McLaren, basically test an F1 car. We'll see what happens down the road. But this will be a story to watch going forward. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Colton Herta. Now, we're going to talk about Colton Herta in regards to this F1 test. Now, Colton Herta says that it remains his ambition to make it to Formula 1 after testing for McLaren in Portimao on Monday and Tuesday of this week. Colton Herta took a couple laps, basically took some laps around the track. From what we saw in the video, he was actually putting up some really good times at the test, and he's had an ambition to go to Formula 1. Now, a lot of people think when it comes to Formula 1 ambitions, they look into the Andretti F1, the Andretti Global Organization. However, there's been a lot of issues when it comes to getting that Andretti Global Organization up, and that's why he's part of the McLaren team. And, of course, McLaren is looking to basically, they're unsure who's going to be in their second car currently at the moment. There's a lot of drivers who are looking to get into that ride. Colton Herta is a very extremely talented driver, and I think he does want to win an IndyCar championship. But he has a contract currently does go through 2023 with basically Andretti Autosport. Now, Kyle Kirkwood, of course, he's going to be going over to that team next year. But Colton Herta probably wants to win a championship in IndyCar, but he's really had aspirations to be in Formula 1 really since he was a kid, and he really wants to be successful and really become the first American Formula 1 driver to be extremely successful. Yes, you do have Logan Sargent, who is also an extremely successful and extremely talented driver, but I think Colton Herta is someone who can generally succeed with the series going forward and really can succeed in Formula 1 if he does go to McLaren. I know McLaren this year has been a little bit down, but Lando Norris has shown some pace and speed, and I think by 2024, they are going to be a better team. Very similar team that we're going to talk about in the near future of this episode. But I think this is really, really great to see. Very exciting for sure, and hopefully he'll get that opportunity, maybe get in one of their Formula 1 cars. It would definitely be exciting for sure, and we'll wait to see what happens in regards to that. And now we'll go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Ernie Francis Jr. As the SRX announced on Monday evening that Ernie Francis Jr. is going to be competing in a 13th SRX car and will be competing this weekend at the SRX race at my home track in I-55 Raceway, meaning that we will now have 13 cars competing in the SRX race at I-55 Raceway. This is really, really exciting news. Ernie Francis Jr., of course, really got a major name off himself, basically from the fact that he was really successful in the SRX, picked up his first SRX victory last year at the Indianapolis Raceway Park, O'Reilly Raceway Park, IRP, and then got an opportunity to race in Indy Lights with Team Penske Sports IndyCar, and has had decent success, but has not won a race yet at this point in the Indy Lights series at the time, but has been extremely competitive. And I love that he's coming back and running in this series, a series that really made him much more successful, of course, a 7-time Trans Am champion as well. I think it'll be somewhat competitive, though. He's going to have to beat guys like Tony Stewart and Ken Schrader for the win, considering those two are probably going to be the two favorites. And probably those two will be my picks going into the event. Ken Schrader's probably got the home field advantage, considering he does own the track. I think he'll be successful in that event. That being said, though, Ernie Francis Jr., who's been up and down so far this year, though, I anticipate, though, that he is going to be extremely competitive and will be a driver that will be a threat to win the race overall. Very exciting news for sure. Glad to see that he's going to be in the event, and I think he'll be competitive to win the event. I don't know if he'll win, but I think he'll be for top 5 at least for sure. He's going to have to go up against Matt Kenseth as well, but I think he'll be very, very fast in this race as well. Good luck to him, and excited to see that he will be getting behind the wheel of one of the SRX cars at I-55 Raceway this weekend. My home track, I unfortunately will not be there at that race to see it. Unfortunately, it is what it is, but I'm excited to see that Ernie Francis Jr. will be getting behind the wheel of the SRX car and racing in that event. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about some penalties and penalty reports that have come out. Now, if you're wondering about Christopher Bell's wheel situation, Christopher Bell is not going to be receiving any penalties coming off. That means that Adam Stevens and the rest of the crew, no one will be basically changing, and the crew will stay intact. And Case Kallenbach has also been reinstated back in the NASCAR after being suspended for a very long time. He has also been reinstated back into the sport as well. Now, the reason we were wondering if Christopher Bell's pit crew and the crew chief were going to be suspended for 4 races is because of the fact that the wheel came off. But I believe the reason that they did not get a penalty in any shape or form is basically because of the fact that the tire did not get on the racetrack and it only stayed on pit road, meaning they did not receive a penalty for that. That at least is some good news, because NASCAR's had major penalties. Maybe NASCAR is going to stop penalizing. Maybe the NASCAR is basically going to be a little more lenient when it comes to their penalty system, because, again, I've said this for a long time. The 4-race suspensions for the tires coming off, I understand you do have to have penalties for this, but the 4-race suspension for the tires coming off, I do think those are a little bit excessive, and they're not extremely excessive, but I do think they are a little bit excessive, and I do think you probably should, at least in some shape or form, reduce the lengths of those penalties, maybe down to 1 or 2 races for the tires. Again, I understand why they have these rules in place, because you have to have these line nuts tied, but again, these tires are big, so they get extremely dangerous, and I think they're bigger this time around than the last tires. That being said, though, I think that this is the right call not to penalize him since it did not go on the racetrack. I'm glad NASCAR decided to not penalize him for that, and I'm glad to see that they at least, again, they're inconsistent with the rulings. I understand people probably wanted to penalize for it, but at the same token, at the same time, I think this is generally the right call, and I'm glad that they decided to be at least a little more lenient when it comes to this. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the Austrian GP TV ratings that came out this morning. According to Adam Stern, ESPN2 earned a 0.58 rating and 1.066 million viewers for Sunday's F1 race in Austria, up from 947,000 viewers for last year's second race at the Red Bull Ring. Those are some pretty decent numbers considering the fact this was not on main ESPN or ABC. This, of course, was on ESPN2. So you're not going to get as many people who are going to watch ESPN2 races, and we've had a lot of those races on ESPN2 compared to races on ABC or ESPN. I personally think that all F1 races should be on main ESPN if you're going to want the sport to grow long term. Also, people tend to watch more races when they're a little bit farther in the day compared to when they're at 8 in the morning, though I will say I always get up in the morning. But this actually was the most watched Austrian Grand Prix that has ever been watched in the history of Formula 1 on TV. So that at least is a major, major positive right there, that the ratings at least are up in that perspective. Overall, I think those ratings are really, really solid, really, really good for Formula 1. Now, I think as time goes on, the next couple years do come around, I do anticipate that the ratings are only going to increase for Formula 1 long term. Really awesome and exciting news for sure, and I'm glad to see that the F1 ratings are up for the Austrian Grand Prix. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the Atlanta TV ratings from this past weekend. And honestly, compared to last weekend at Road America, they're actually very, very solid. According to Adam Stern, USA earned a 1.51 rating and 2.626 million viewers for Sunday's NASCAR race at Atlanta. This is up from a 1.47 rating and 2.513 million viewers for last year's race on NBC, for last year on NBC altogether. This Sunday's rating beats all races last year on NBCSN, and the race was the highest rated event last weekend of every sporting event across the United States. This is absolutely huge in major, major ways. And now compared to last weekend, this is really, really big because not only did you basically have a bigger rating than you had last weekend, but you also had the more watch race than you had on all of NBCSN. And it's no secret that I believe that USA does bring in more viewership, but this does show a couple things. One, I think this does help the fact argument for people that want Atlanta Super Speedway to stay long term. This really helps that argument and keeps Atlanta around with potentially 2 days. Now, I personally think they're showing me 1 day, but it's going to keep Atlanta down for probably 2 days long term going forward. It's also great to see that more people are tuning in. Now, this also basically means that road course racing probably could go by the wayside at some point, because let's look at the Road America race this past week, the last weekend. 700,000 less people watched the Road America race than watched this race. Now, the Road America race should have been on NBC. The fact that they did not put that on NBC for the 4th of July race is a little bit ridiculous. But you also could have put this race on NBC. And I think most Cup Series races should generally be on NBC, in my honest opinion. However, we cannot dismiss that this is a freaking dub. This is a massive, massive dub for NASCAR. Now, I definitely like to see some of these races on USA get up to the 3 to 3.5 million range, but that's going to be really tough to say. And generally, the Cup race on NBC do generally get less viewership than Fox. I don't know why, considering NBC's coverage is generally a lot better than the coverage on Fox has been over the last couple years, though I will say they were generally really, really biased. I thought some of the coverage for NBC this weekend, at least, wasn't as good as other coverage we've seen in the past. That being said, though, I do think generally the Atlanta ratings being up as much as they were, well, they're up a little bit, but the fact that they're even up to begin with, I think is generally a much more positive thing. Definitely really awesome to see for sure, and I'm glad to see that Atlanta TV ratings are up for this weekend. Really excited to see for sure, and hopefully when we go to New Hampshire, the trend continues up. I'm not sure if it will continue up, and that could be a telltale sign going forward, but I'm very excited to see it, at least for this weekend, the Atlanta TV ratings are up. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Rick Ross. Now, this is really, really shocking to hear, like some of the stories coming up here in the near future. But according to Adam Stern, Rick Ross attended the NASCAR race at Atlanta last weekend and met with industry folks. He is said to be interested in collaborating with NASCAR either through promotions or even possibly becoming a team investor. Now, This is really, really huge because Rick Ross, for those who don't know, is a really, really big rapper. Basically, he's been around in the rap game for now 15 to 20 years. He released some massive, massive songs. He's been featured on some big projects from people like Drake and Lil Baby, and has been on major, major projects over the years as well, and has also been invested in businesses as well. And he's been part of the Miami culture as well. Now, talking about him becoming a potentially team investor, what team would he invest in? First thing, he probably wouldn't try to invest in a team like 2311 Racing. 2311 Racing is a team that is potentially going to be growing maybe a third car in the near future, and becoming a team investor with that team would be another thing. Now, he also could be a team investor in Trackhouse, considering he is from the Miami area. It would make a lot of sense for him, though, to be investing in the Trackhouse Racing organization and getting some money involved in that team. That would be pretty big, considering Trackhouse is a fast-growing team as well, and they're showing a lot of branding, and seeing a team like that succeed could be really huge. But just think about all the stuff that's going on with the sport. We've seen so many names and faces over the last couple years you never thought would get involved in NASCAR, basically hosting things. First, Michael Jordan owning a NASCAR Cup Series team with Denny Hamlin with 2311 Racing. Then, of course, you basically have Pitbull, who's a part owner of Trackhouse Racing. You've got so many people involved in our team. Scott Borchetta with Big Machine Racing. So many people that you never thought. And also, Alvin Kamara, not mistaken, basically working inside of NASCAR is basically the guys helping with the social media growth and development of the sport as well. Rick Ross coming to sport, but I thought NASCAR was dead, huh? I thought NASCAR was dead. I guess not. This is absolutely huge for the sport that Rick Ross is looking to get involved. I know Rick Ross has some ambitions with NASCAR. We've seen posts in the past where he basically used to own, I think, one of the old 48 NASCAR Cup Series cars, just stock cars. It just is so definitely incredible to see you got a guy like Rick Ross who's trying to get involved with the sport and invest in the sport in some way. It's big for the sport, really awesome to see for sure, and I'm very excited to see Rick Ross interested. We'll see how big the story goes long term, but I think this is generally really, really awesome, to be honest with you. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about NASCAR's next TV deal. Now, we're not essentially basically talking about what is going on with the TV deal in regards to what networks, but we're talking about when it comes to teams and investments. Adam Stern reported yesterday that Steve Phelps of NASCAR is on if NASCAR will change money split in next TV deal. He says, we're going to negotiate in the media. It doesn't make sense to do, but behind closed doors. We are going to do what we believe is fair and put forth what we believe is a fair relationship with our teams. Now, currently the current TV deal, because remember the next TV deal is going to be coming around 2025. There's going to be a new TV contract coming in. We know that there's going to be a couple of new TV teams that are potentially coming in. ESPN is rumored. There's also rumors that NBC may be leaving. However, I think there's a good chance NBC stays, and but also Fox also potentially rumored to come back as well for the next TV deal. We're just going to have to wait and see what happens in regards to that. But talking about when it comes to the split, so the tracks currently, I believe, get 70% of the TV revenue, and I believe that the teams get around 20%, and then other people, the other industry executives, get around 10%. And we've seen Denny Hamlin basically come out as of recently saying that they definitely need 100% change when it comes to the TV deal. They absolutely do need to change in charging how much it's going to be for the teams and drivers. The teams really want more money. 2311, for example, wants to expand a third car. They're not going to play, and they also want to open up a shop. They're not going to do that unless they change it. I've been saying this for a long time, but the business model currently at the moment is not 100% sustainable. That's why they brought the next-gen car. That's why they've been making generally changes when it comes to that. And when it does come to the next TV deal, they do need to basically bring more money for the teams. And hope the charters can also get changed as well, where the cost of the charters definitely goes down. And another thing I want to see change when it comes to the next TV deal is when it comes to the open teams. The open teams currently right now get only about 1% of the revenue. It used to be around 15%, but over the last couple of years, the open teams have been getting less and less of the pie. I think the open teams should be able to get at least some of the pie and also some of the others there. Tracks should also not be getting around 70% of the TV revenue. It's ridiculous that they get 70. I think personally it should be 50-50 on everything. 50% goes to the tracks, the other 50% goes to the rest. I think that would make a lot more sense and be a much more fair distribution, and you would have better things for the sport, and maybe it would cost less money for some of the things as well. The next-gen car, of course, is supposed to bring more of a profit for the teams long-term going forward, but I also think that there had to be some changes in regards to that as well when it comes to things. I just think there had definitely had to generally be things that change around the TV deal, next TV deal. I think that the next TV deal, when it comes to how much it's going to cost, they're talking it's going to potentially be the largest one we have generally ever seen when it comes to the cost and everything around that. So this is a story we're going to be watching long term. This is definitely one of the bigger stories long term, and we're probably going to start hearing more about the next TV deal. In fact, I think we probably will start hearing more about it. An established deal will probably come sometime in 2023. We'll more than likely hear about that. We'll just see what happens going forward, and we'll see more in the next TV deal. This could be big for the sport, whatever they do, but also could be negative for the sport long term. And now we're going to jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Alex Palou. As we all initially thought, it was announced earlier today that he was going to return to Chip Ganassi Racing, right? Well, Alex Palou, out of nowhere, about an hour ago, basically revealed that the PR statement is basically BS and says and announced that he is going to be going to McLaren in 2023. Now, currently it's unclear if he's going to be driving IndyCar or Formula E, but he has ambitions to go to Formula 1 because he is testing he'll be testing a Formula 1 car at some point, and basically he's been tagging the McLaren F1 organization and basically tagging them. This came out of nowhere. And I know that people thinking, there were rumors about a month ago about he was potentially going to go to there, and the people like Jennifer Fryer, Tony Kanaan were basically absolutely right. And this is huge in major ways because we all thought, and many of us thought, that he was going to be returning to Chip Ganassi Racing and driving for the organization in 2023. He just won a championship with them last year and could win the championship in 2022. And what Chip Ganassi Racing thinking was, we had a long-term driver who races very similar to Scott Dixon. He potentially could be a very successful driver in this series as well long-term with Chip Ganassi Racing had found their guy. Now they're going to have to look for somebody else. Now, first question we ask is who's probably going to replace Alex Palou? I would think Rinus VeeKay, because Rinus VeeKay has been in the conversation. He's one of the drivers rumored to go to the McLaren ride next year. But now he's looking out. He will more than likely go and drive for Chip Ganassi Racing. He's a very talented driver, been very successful at Carpenter Racing, and they're definitely looking at him. You've also got that guy they just basically announced as basically testing for them and basically driving an IndyCar program. That could be another guy that could go with options as well. They've got other drivers they could look as well. Maybe somehow they get Felix Rosenqvist back, though he's with them, with McLaren. Who knows at this point? Now, looking at Alex Palou, talking about will he be in IndyCar Formula 1, that's not been entirely announced. But like I mentioned, he has ambitions currently to go race right now in Formula 1. He wants to race in Formula 1 and get into that second F1 car. There's a lot of drivers looking to get in there. You've got Pat O'Ward, you've got Colton Herta, you've got Alex Palou now, and you've also got Oscar Piastri among other drivers, and even some other drivers that are being considered as well, including Valtteri Bottas, and also Alex Albon apparently also is looking to get into that ride as well. So there's a lot of drivers up for grabs for the ride. We know Colton Herta, he'll be with Andretti Autosport through at least 2023, but available in 2024. We also know at this point, though, Daniel Ricciardo, more than likely, he's going to be returning to the team. Now, looking at this as well, if Alex Palou goes and returns to IndyCar and goes to McLaren's IndyCar program, this means that they're not only going to have Pat O'Ward, who's a championship threat. They're not only going to have Alexander Rossi, who's going to probably be a championship threat in this ride, but they're also going to have Alex Palou. You're going to have three drivers who have contended for championships, who have won championships in IndyCar and have been successful. And two of these guys want to go to Formula 1, and one of these guys already has competed in Formula 1, that being Alexander Rossi. Now, Alex Palou could also go to Formula E and could be teammates with Felix Rosenqvist. But at this point, I think Felix Rosenqvist is all but confirmed he'll be going to the Formula E program. There's a good chance that Alex Palou and Felix Rosenqvist could be teammates in their Formula E program because he also tested Formula 1 car. He's got ambitions to go to Formula 1 for a very, very long time. Now, getting to the Chip Ganassi Racing PR stumble, this is definitely really, really crazy because, again, I don't think anybody saw this coming in the industry. A lot of people thought maybe this was going to happen. Some thought it was, and this is more likely than our story we're going to get into here in just a little bit. But, wow, I did not see this coming. This is definitely going to be awkward next 5 or 6 races because IndyCar only has like 6, 7 races left, and then he's going to McLaren. This IndyCar silly season is going to be wild. There's so many things that are expected to happen in IndyCar silly season. I thought maybe this could happen, but also at the same time, I really did not think that this is going to happen. This is crazy, absolutely nuts, and I never expect Alex Palou was going to be going to IndyCars to McLaren. Now, absolutely, if he goes to Formula E, I think he'll be a championship threat over there. He's going to, of course, have to go up against guys like Lucas Degrassi and also other drivers in this series have been successful. But I think he absolutely will be a championship threat if he goes to Formula E. And if with McLaren, because Aaron McLaren SP's been extremely solid, if he goes to McLaren SP next year instead of the Formula E program, he'll be successful and will still be a championship threat, just like he's been at Chip Ganassi Racing in IndyCar. And now we're going to jump on to the final major story of today's episode, as we are talking about probably the most shocking silly season NASCAR announcement in a very long time. Probably the most shocking since the Trackhouse Racing announcement. As it was announced this morning that Tyler Reddick is going to be driving for 2311 Racing starting in 2024. And it was confirmed today to the media that it will be a multi-year deal with the team starting in 2024. Now, currently 2311 Racing does not know, it is unknown if they will be a 2 or 3 car team in 2024, and we'll get into that in a second. Wallace and Kurt Busch will be returning to the team in 2023, so it's confirmed both those drivers are going to be returning to the team. Richard Childress Racing then released a statement later with Rich Childress Racing, and they basically said that we have been really excited with what Rich he's been doing, and we'll be excited to see what we'll be doing in 22 and 2023, though this statement is very, very unfortunate. And he basically said, Tyler Reddick said it should not be a surprise that he's going to be going to the team, considering he did say that he'd be exploring his options. This is absolutely shocking because I'll be honest with you guys, I did not expect Tyler Reddick to be leaving this team after 2023. Now, remember, he will be with this team in 2023 because they picked up his option for 2023. He was asked by the media, I wrote America, and they asked, are you going to be looking at our teams in 2024? And he gave a really big smile. There's some theories going around that potentially he could have been already talking to Denny Hamlin about this all the way back at the Busch Clash, considering they were talking together there and starting. Next thing, like I mentioned, Kurt Busch and Bubba Wallace will be back in the team in 2023. That has been confirmed, and Bubba Wallace is confirmed for the long term. Now, theories begin is what happens. Do they become a 2 or 3 car team? I think there's a good chance that they could become a 3-car team. It depends on charters and stuff, though I will say basically going to 2024. Denny Hamlin said it until the charter system change and the TV deal and not a sponsorship model works going forward. He basically said that basically how much it's going to cost. It's going to be hard for them to become a 3-car team. My big theory is that it's going to end up being a 2-car team with 2311. I know Denny Hamlin wants to keep Kurt Busch long term, but I think Kurt Busch's last year is going to be 2023. And Tyler Reddick basically is going to end up replacing Kurt Busch in the 45 car in 2024. I know a lot of people like myself want Kurt to return. It would be great to have all 3 of these drivers together on the same organization. But at the same token, at the same time, I really do feel like that. There's another question to answer, but let's now get into Tyler Reddick and about this. This is a major move and a major play in the silly season for a lot of reasons. Tyler Reddick just picked up his first career NASCAR Cup Series victory in the series about a week or 2 ago at Road America, and he absolutely deserves this. Now, if this move was happening for next year, I would have said this would have been a horrendous and bad move, but by 2024, I expect 2311 Racing to drastically improve. And let's be honest with Rich Childress Racing, Tyler Reddick's been drastically outperforming equipment at Rich Childress Racing and has been doing an incredible job with the organization and the team. So he was going to have to, at some point anyways, more than likely find a new place to go and be more successful. Now, there, of course, there are other opportunities could be available. Teams like Henry Motorsports and Trackhouse Racing. However, I think 2311 Racing in the next couple of years is gradually going to improve as an organization, as a team. As a matter of fact, this year, Bubba Wallace and Kurt Busch, they both have been really improving when it comes to their talent and their craft. Bubba Wallace has been definitely better this year. It's just a shame the pit crew has been a problem, but they did make pit crew changes for Bubba Wallace and brought some Christopher Bell's guys over to the team, and that should hopefully help Bubba Wallace, because Bubba Wallace should have 7 or 8 top 10 this year, and maybe a win or 2 this year, and should be a playoff contender. Instead of being a driver who's around 24th or 25th in points, he's been better than 24th or 25th in points, though he's been frustrated with the crew. And of course, Kurt Busch this season has won a race with the team and has had quite a few top 5s and top 10s, and also currently sits in the playoffs right now, sitting 16th in the regular season in the standings. So he's had a pretty solid year so far, though it's been down compared to when he was at Chip Ganassi Racing. He's had a solid year. Tyler Reddick is definitely one of the hottest prospects when it comes to talents. He is definitely a driver that everyone regards as potentially the next Kyle Larson. Now, he's not as good as a guy like Kyle Larson is, but basically Tyler Reddick has been extremely successful in everything he's gotten into. 2-time NASCAR Xfinity Series champion, 1 time with Junior Motorsports, and 1 time with Richard Childress Racing in the Xfinity Series. And like I mentioned, I think that he was basically hitting his ceiling with the organization. And I think going to 2311 Racing, they've got a much higher ceiling, in my opinion, than a team like Rich Childress Racing does. Now, there's also some other big questions in regards to Rich Childress Racing after 2023. What are they going to do? Because they thought they had the driver set for a very long time. Now they got to figure out what they're going to do for 2024. Now, obviously, they do have a couple drivers in their Xfinity Series program, that being Sheldon Creed and Austin Hill. I think Austin Hill would definitely be a decent option to go with if you had the option right there to go with. But I don't know if Austin Hill is going to do great in Cup. Same thing for Sheldon Creed. Sheldon Creed has struggled in Xfinity Series this year. I think he's around 16th or 17th in points. I did think he did make up some points on the cutoff line this weekend, but generally has really struggled this year in the Xfinity Series. Now, I do expect that Sheldon Creed and Austin Hill are both going to improve next year and be championship threats, but I'm not sure if those two will be absolutely ready. You do also have Noah Gragson, and Noah Gragson did tweet earlier today with basically a smile. That could be a really good option for the team. There's also eventually he wants to go to Cup Series, but also teams are going to be looking at Noah Gragson as well and seeing that Noah Gragson really has had some intent and some issues this past weekend in Road America, though he is trying to repay his image right there. Noah Gragson is being looked at. Maybe he goes to College Racing one year, and we know that College does have a really big affiliation with Rich Hills Racing. You also have guys like Parker Kligerman. Now, Parker Kligerman is not probably the #1 priority, but Parker Kligerman is a very talented driver who gets the best out of his equipment, and we know that he was looking to potentially go to Rich Hills Racing in 2022 in the Xfinity Series and take the ride that Austin Hill eventually took, but he wanted to go into that ride and race for the organization. Now, there's a lot of talk that he'll be racing full-time potentially next year in the Truck Series in 2023. They want to go full-time, Henderson Motorsports does, but I think he would absolutely be a great option to go with. But I think this has blinded Rich Hills Racing. They're going to be looking at Austin Dillon. Ty Dillon's also another guy that could be a really good option. Ty Dillon is, of course, the grandson of Rich Childress. I think he'd be a decent driver for the team. Not fantastic, but he would be a decent option in having the grandsons on the team. You also do have Eric Jones. Eric Jones right now, I believe, will return to Petty GMS in 2023, but I think RCR is better than Petty GMS currently at the moment, and that would be a little bit of an upgrade, and we'd be able to show their talent. There's also a really crazy possibility, and this is not a realm possibility, but maybe Rich Hills Racing sells the organization or sells part of Charters and gives it to Junior Motorsports. Junior Motorsports is looking to jump up to the Cup Series potentially on a full-time basis, but they would have, if they wanted to do it, they'd have to basically sell their Charters. Dale Jr. does have family ties and connections to the team, as Dale Earnhardt, of course, drove for Rich Hills Racing pretty much his whole entire career with the organization. And that would be something that I could definitely see, take one of the Charters and give Junior Motorsports and partner up with Rich Hills Racing Xfinity Series team. Maybe Jeffrey Earnhardt also gets an option. Who really knows at this point? Other questions is, and other things I say, is that, like I said, will they improve? I expect them to improve. There is so much to go through this in absolute chaos and craziness from silly season, because I don't think anybody saw this coming. Most people in the industry really didn't see this coming, but again, I think this is absolutely an amazing and a great move for Tyler Reddick. I think he really needs to get out of RCR, and now he also gets to express his opinion freely. We all know what happened 2 years ago with what happened when Trump basically tried to call out Bubba Wallace, and then Tyler Reddick basically said he does not need to apologize for what he basically said. I'm excited to see Tyler Reddick going to 2311 Racing, and eventually maybe he goes to Joe Gibbs Racing, who knows. The fact we're already talking about 2024 silly season is absolutely nuts and absolutely crazy, and I cannot wait to see that Tyler Reddick is going to 2311 Racing in 2024. I know some people think maybe he could get out of his option as early as 2023. I don't see Rich Hills Racing dropping an option. In fact, they're planning to have him in there in 2023. We know that basically Denny Hamlin also said today as well, pretty much, that he believed in Tyler Reddick and he was a generational talent. I 1000% agree. And Tyler Reddick, I think, could contend for championships. Now, maybe long term he does goes to Joe Gibbs Racing. He's young enough to do it. But I think this is absolutely an incredible move. He deserves this. He needed a great ride to go to. And I'm very excited to see that Tyler Reddick will be going to 2311 Racing starting in 2024. So, anyway, that is going to be for today's NASCAR and Motorsports video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, turn notifications on to be notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on my page on Patreon as well. Let's get over that and comment your thoughts on today's video. What are your thoughts about Tyler Reddick going to 2311 Racing starting in 2024? Let me know in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about Alex Palou going to McLaren in 2023? Let me know in the comments below. Tomorrow on my channel, I think I'm going to release a video potentially about Rich Hills Racing and 10 drivers who could drive for their team starting in 2024. Let me know in the comments below. And then, of course, we'll have other videos dropping throughout the rest of the week and get you guys set up for New Hampshire. So anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's video, and I'll see you guys next time for some more great, awesome NASCAR and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.